Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Thanks for joining this instance of the Antrea committee meeting. Today is the 4th of November or the 5th, according to your location. So for today, we are going to discuss a few topics. First, we have a proposal for a proxy mode for the Antrea flow aggregator from Antonin. And still, Anton has proposed to discuss another issue that was raised by Pulkit concerning usage or not usage, or whether we should use or not Antria as a library. But Anton surely has more details on this. And finally, we will have an update on the status of the Antria 2.2 release given to us from LAN. So maybe, Antonin, if you want to start with the proxy mode for flow aggregator, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Salvatore. Let me show my screen. I don't have slide, but I opened a pretty detailed issue with a diagram, so I'm gonna use that as soon as I'm finding my browser. Oops. Okay, do you see my browser or am I sharing something else?
I see a GitHub, the page with the GitHub issue, yes.
Perfect. Yeah, it's not the right one. This one's for after. Okay. Yeah. So I'm gonna mostly give a quick overview of the problem I was trying to solve and the solution I had in mind. I mean, I already started implementing that solution, but before opening a PR for it, I wanted to present the issue that I was trying to resolve. Um, so the scenario I was looking at is a scenario where you have Antrea and you want to export pod connection information using the Antrea flow exporter feature in IPFix format. And so the way it works today is that all the agents are gonna export IPFix data to the flow aggregator, and we run a single replica of the flow aggregator in the cluster. And then that flow aggregator can then export that data to something outside of the cluster. For example, you can have an external IPFix collector, which is running outside of the cluster, and export all the IPFix data generated by Antrea to that external IPFix collector. And the flow aggregator today is not just forwarding the records it receives from the entry agents. It's also doing what we call aggregation, where it adds some missing information and it correlates records sent by the source node and the destination node. So I have a diagram here. If you have pod X communicating with pod Y, maybe pod Y is a server, and pod X is on node 1, pod Y is on node 2. The entry agent instances running on node 1 and node 2 are both going to export IPFix data to the flow aggregator. The IPFix data sent by the first entry agent is going to, for example, include the source pod name, pod X, and of course the source node name, node 1, while the information exported by the other agent running on node 2 is going to include the um, destination pod name, pod Y, but it's not going to include the source pod name, pod X, because node 2 doesn't know about pod X. And the way the flow aggregator works is it's going to use the 5 tuple, which is included um, in both data sets to map the two IPFix records and export a single one to an external IPFix collector or an S3 bucket or a ClickHouse database table. But for the sake of this discussion, we're going to focus on the first case, which is an external IPFix collector. And if you look at the bigger picture, and if your Kubernetes nodes are running inside VMs, running on a hypervisor, well, maybe the switch in that hypervisor, the virtual switch in that hypervisor, also has IPFix support and it can export IPFix data about the node-to-node flows to the external IPFix collector. Um, So by default in Antrea, let's say in encap mode, traffic is going to be encapsulated in Geneve, and hypervisor, sorry, is going to see that Geneve traffic and may export IPFix data about it to the IPFix collector. And if you have like a physical underlay that also supports exporting IPFix data, in theory, you could also have that physical router export IPFix data, and that's all going to go to the same external IPFix collector possibly. Um, and The observation as was making, and of course you can also imagine a scenario where your hypervisor is of course running Kubernetes workloads by having Kubernetes nodes as VMs, but you can also have like applications running directly at VMs, and the hypervisor exporting IPFix data about those applications. Um, so my observation was that um, if you have like such a I don't want to say complex, but such a comprehensive deployment with like IPFix support at different layers, um, doing the using the flow aggregator in Antrea, in my opinion, is kind of like introducing some asymmetry, right? Because you have like all the hypervisors exporting source IPFix records, destination IPFix records, and yet in Antrea, we kind of like that have that aggregation process, which is merging records from the source and the destination and exporting a single record to the centralized IPFix collector. To say differently, um, if you look at the network as a succession of like networking ops or networking devices, in the case of Antrea, we merge the records for the first network device on the path, which is the Antrea managed switch, and for the last device on the path, which is also the Antrea managed switch at the destination node. But if you look at other devices which are on the network path, maybe the vSwitch in the hypervisor, maybe the physical router, there is no merging of records, which is happening, right? Um, and so I feel like if we want to have and sorry, and I feel like it's a job of the IPFix collector to be external IPFix collector in this case to be able to correlate all those records corresponding to one end-to-end connection exported by different devices in the network path and kind of do that correlation job to determine what the network path for that traffic is. And so my proposal was in order to accommodate that use case, I wanted to propose to have a new operational mode for the flow aggregator, which I called proxy mode. And in that mode, the flow aggregator would just act as a relay between the entry agent's flow exporter and the external IPFix collector. It would not do any correlation of source and destination records. It could still add missing information to the record if applicable and if desired. For example, pod labels, that's something we support, but it would operate in a stateless fashion. So instead of buffering connection information in the flow aggregator, running the aggregation process, exporting correlated records to the external IPFix collector, we would not do any buffering. So we would like not have any significant memory usage in the flow aggregator. We would just forward proxy records directly to the external IPFix collector. Now, in a way, this is very similar to having the agents directly connect to the IPFix collector, which is also something that's supported in Antrea, right? You can configure the flow exporter in the agent to export records directly to an external IPFix collector without going through the flow aggregator. I just believe that there are still advantages to using the flow aggregator as a central proxy for a given Kubernetes cluster. I think there are some scaling advantages possibly, but it also helps to have a single IPFix session to the external IPFix collector as opposed to potentially hundreds of sessions if you have a large cluster. Um, so yeah, that's pretty much the problem I was trying to solve. Basically, if I were to summarize it in one sentence, the problem is to better integrate with external IPFix collector systems, which potentially already support very advanced features and complex network topologies and a variety of network devices. And my proposal to handle these cases to introduce a new operating mode in the flow aggregators that would simply proxy records. It would be very few changes in the code base, I believe, because most of the code can be reused. We're just removing some part of the logic, or rather making it optional through configuration. And there are a few advantages. The flow aggregator would operate in a stateless fashion. We could even consider having another replica of the or multiple replicas of the flow aggregator in that case, because if it's stateless and it's just proxying records, we can just scale it horizontally pretty easily. So that would be pretty straightforward to do. So that's another advantage of that. Yeah, I think that's all I have. Um, and I'm happy to clarify if something is not clear or answer any questions.
Thanks.
Uh,
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Go
yeah,
ahead.
please go ahead.
No,
Sorry.
I was just saying that I don't have any question. Actually, my only question was about, why not just let the agents directly connect to the collector, and that's been already answered. Go ahead, Chan.
I wanted to understand what's the difference before and after using this proxy mode. I mean, the flow records seen by the collector. My understanding is that before, with the current implementation, uh, for each flow, actually the collector will receive only a single flow record because we aggregate the flows observed on different nodes. And after using this proxy mode, because each flow from each node is uploaded to collector directly or via the proxy, the collector will see two records for a single flow, and it is expected that the collector should handle this case and will identify that these two flows belong to the same session. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Like if you look at this picture, so there would be one from this agent on the left, one for the agent on the right. Uh, Also, if you look at the full thing, right, one from the hypervisor on the left, one from the hypervisor on the right, and then if you have like multiple um, physical switches or routers in the physical network, for example, and they support IPFix as well, you could have like one or more records coming from the physical network. I think the idea is that an advanced IPFix collector would already have the ability to correlate records between, for example, an hypervisor switch on the source host and a switch on the destination host would also have the ability to correlate records received from the physical network if you have IPFix enabled devices. So basically, with that proposal in proxy mode, we just treat um, the Antrea vSwitch as another just a regular network hop, just a regular network device. Yeah. So you would get one record from the source and one from the destination.
Which mode is more common in IPFix collectors? Expecting the source to aggregate the records, or expect the source to send individual records from every node? I'm not familiar with
Yeah.
this.
Also, this is not really a formal IETF document. That was more of a presentation. It describes a lot of different operations. So both uh, both approaches are like common. I don't want to say common, but both approaches are described on those slides. Those are more like two modes of operation. I would say that the approach we had, I don't know if I can show a picture. Would that be? Yes. So flow mediation would be what we're doing today in the flow aggregator, right?
I see. Yeah.
Creating aggregated flow records. What I was proposing is more like making it, yes, merging is IPFix protocol mediation. I think I put it in the issue. I don't have to. Yeah, IPFix protocol mediation using an IPFix distributor. Let me find it here. Distributor. Yeah, simply it forwards input flow records. IPFix proxy, IPFix distributor. So I think both modes of operation are somewhat common. I think when you have an heterogeneous network, right, with different types of devices, and especially like physical devices from different vendors, for example, the idea is you have an external IPFix collector which is smart enough um, uh, to do that correlation. I think for what we're doing in the SIA project for Antrea, of course, it made sense to be able to do that aggregation, right? Because in that case, there was no real external IPFix collector, right? The aggregator essentially was the external IPFix collector, and we were writing that data into a database to be consumed by dashboards. But the use case I'm trying to handle is more of a case where if you already have a smart external IPFix collector with a lot of that functionality and with that ability to correlate records from source and destination, we don't really need to do it again in Antrea, right? And by doing it in Antrea, by having to maintain that connection state, we're quote unquote wasting resources, right? I think we've had some scale testing where the memory usage of the flow aggregator could get pretty high because you have a lot of connections and we have to hold on to that connection information for a long time.
Got it. Yeah, and my question was mainly to understand whether we will maintain two modes in the long term, or we will switch to this new processing mode eventually. It seems that the two modes are applicable to different scenario, and they will exist for long term, right?
Yeah, that's how I see it. And most of the code is going to be the same. Yeah.
I see. Yeah, sounds good to me. Yeah, I don't have other questions.
Good. Do we have any other question on this topic?
Yeah, Anthony, so there's one like, so now like aggregation will be done in the flow collector, right? So now, so we have to export all the data from the flow aggregator, right? To flow collector, IPFix collector, I mean. So there will be network overhead, right? Like we need to send more data uh, to the.
There is potentially close to twice as much data. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So in that case, yeah, I'm maybe some.
Yeah, I was planning on doing a bandwidth analysis and including it in the issue. That's a good point. But we're not talking about like an order of magnitude more data. But yeah, there can be more data.
Okay.
If you think about it differently, actually, when we yeah, I would say it's going to be a bit less than twice as much data. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we want to check that because yeah, might create some problem in network overhead because IPFix collector is also doing like maybe in the network, right? They will also do hypervisor and other devices VM-based collection, and then we will also add this. So yeah, maybe to benchmark this.
Well, yeah, that sounds like a deployment specific question here. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure about the impact on network bandwidth, considering that in the end, it's one record per connection, so it's not really like a port mirroring scenario. Of course, you trade off memory usage for pretty much for sending traffic over the network. But it's good to test it, but I don't think it's going to be it's going to be something that could restrict the bandwidth available for application usage in a significant way. Anyway, is there any other question on this topic? Okay, so Antoine, maybe shall we move to the next topic? I think you introduced it, so maybe you already know what you want to talk about.
Yeah, this is gonna be quicker, I think, and simpler. So this was something that Polkit reported, right? He reported that even though we released version V2 of Antrea, so we changed the major version, we did not upgrade the V2 in the module path in the go.mod, which I think is required where when you increase a major version, and that's creating like import issues. So if someone tries to import entria.io/entria, they're gonna pull in the latest released version of entria 1.x, which is entria 1.15 dot something. And obviously, this is not the latest version, right? We have been on 2.1 now, and 2.2 is coming out soon. And what we should have done is when we released Antrea v2, we should have added a patch to update the path in go.mod. I'm just going to show the go.mod here to make it more obvious. Yes, and this path here, the module path, should end with /v2 now that the major version is v2. And so this way, when other projects import Antrea, they can choose whether they want to import Antrea v1 or Antrea v2. If they omit the version, then it's going to be Antrea v1. If they add a v2 in their import path, then it's going to be Antrea v2. And that's pretty common for Go libraries to do that, because it's pretty common for Go libraries to break backward compatibility at some point and introduce a major change. And it's also pretty common in that case to support both versions for a long time. I think, for example, there is a YAML. Do I have it here? Yeah, we import both Go package in YAML v2 and v3. Although here they use a dot and not a slash to separate the version, but I think using a dot like in klog v2 here is more common. Using a slash, sorry. Anyway, so basically our Go mod is incorrect right now, but the issues that Polkit opened reminded me that we have like a bigger issue in a way, right? Which is that if you look at a project like Antrea, it's not a library, right? We produce like binaries which are run as containers in the Kubernetes cluster. The Antrea repository itself is not meant to be imported as a library. And when someone tries to import Antrea, because there are some good reasons to import Antrea, right? Typically, you want to import Antrea so you can access the client code, which is generated from the CRD definitions. When you do that, you also pull in all of Antrea dependencies, right? And in Antrea, we depend on a lot of Kubernetes libraries, for example, the API server library. And so it's easy to create conflicts when the project which is importing Antrea is importing those same dependencies. And it's quite easy to go into dependency hell in this case. And so there are better ways to solve this, right? And the better way to solve it is to let importers of Antrea code, import all the API stuff separately from the main Antrea repository. So we can put API definitions, the CRD types file, as well as generated client-side code in a separate module, essentially, so that other projects can import that module specifically and don't have to import all of Antrea with all the dependencies. And there are two ways to do that I'm aware of. I think historically a pretty common way is to have a separate repository and a separate module for all your API definitions. And I think that Calico takes that approach, if I'm not mistaken. Do they call it? Oh, API. Here we go. Perfect. They have like a dedicated API repo where I assume they have like their CRD definitions. I didn't actually. Yes. So they have the generated client set, and probably they have the CRD definition as well. Well, I'm sure if I wanted to find them, I would be able to. But that's the idea. And then they import this API module into their main repository, right? If I look for API, here you go, Project Calico API. And this first repository has less dependencies, I imagine, than the main project, right? Well, it still depends on some Kubernetes repositories, but overall fewer dependencies. The second approach is to leverage the workspace support introduced in Go 18. It should work the same way. With the Go workspace approach, you can have like multiple modules, and all those modules can live in the same GitHub repository. So we could follow a similar approach and put sorry, and put the APIs in their own modules, but everything would still be in the main repository. So I think both approaches have some advantages. If we have two separate repos, it can make like adding some features and some APIs a bit more tricky in a way, because it becomes like a two-step process, right? First, you have to add the API as a separate PR in the API repository, and then you have to add the feature implementation to the main repository. But if you look at the way we do things today, for any significant feature, we ask people to submit a separate PR for the API changes anyway, so that wouldn't be such a big disruptive change. And the advantage of the second approach, the workspace approach, is that we keep kind of like that monorepo approach where everything happens in one repository, and so contribution is easy this way. Yeah, so if we do go with a separate repo for APIs, that repo would not be versioned in the traditional way using semantic versioning. Basically, if you look at the way Calico does it, it just imports a specific commit directly in the main project. We wouldn't be using a specific versioning scheme, which would make things too complicated. So those are the two approaches. I don't have like a strong preference myself. Once again, I'm happy to try and answer questions. I haven't tried those approaches. But I'm pretty sure they're both gonna work. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. And first, maybe let me know if you think this is a good idea to solve both problems at the same time. Because it's easy to just add v2 to the go.mod, but I think we should look at the bigger picture.
I believe it's a good idea to look at the bigger picture also because implementing the bigger picture after all doesn't seem like a big effort. Regarding the two approaches, I also don't have a strong preference. However, I like changing as little as possible, so maybe I have a slight preference for the approach based on Go workspaces, as we will not have to use different repositories. And in my opinion, we can fairly assume that everybody that's compiling Antrea for or consuming Antrea is on Go 1.18 or above. I believe that they can be taken for granted. So let's say that not a strong preference, but for me, a slight preference from approach two. Do we have any other opinion?
I'm trying to understand why we don't actually need to update the package name with approach one. If the package the repo path is already Antrea -io / APIs, we use a different module name in its Go mode. Is that what do you mean?
Yeah, no, when we import for files which import the APIs, yeah, we would have to change the imports. I think what I was trying to say, and I don't think I'm not even sure it's fully accurate, but if you look at if we go with approach one, right? Technically, to make things work and let not customers, but consumers import the APIs, we don't actually need to modify that module, right? Because they wouldn't be importing these modules, they would be importing the API module, right? Antrea.io/APIs. So we would not actually need to, in theory, correct this by adding a v2. And if we don't need to correct this by adding a v2, we don't need to go in and look at all our source files. Of course, we would do it in an automatic fashion. But if I look at this, for example, right, I wouldn't need to go and add a v2 to all those. Well, those imports would change. This one would also change. I guess this is a bad example because everything here is is pretty much API
Yeah.
related stuff. Let me find another one. Sure. Oh no, IP. Oh, this one has no import. Okay, I'm being unlucky right now. Actually, let me look at the flow aggregator. I know this one has a lot of entry import probably. Yeah, I wouldn't need to go in and change all those imports to say Antrea.io/Antrea/v2, right? Because I could keep the current module name in the go.mod.
I see. You mean we don't need to rename imports of Antrea project itself, but we still need to update API path regardless of the approach.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I see.
I think if I look at Calico, did they, because I think they're on v3, right? Version 3. The tag, yeah, v3. Do they have, if you look at their Go mode, see, they don't even have a v3 at the end here. And that's because I think in a way it sends a signal that this module is not meant to be imported by other projects, right? If you want to use the Calico APIs, you should import um, uh, the this module, right? You have no business importing project Calico/Calico because it's not the way it's meant to be consumed, right?
Yeah. But why this is not the case of the second approach? I assume with a separate Go mode, even in the same repo, we just change the API path, right? Why we also need to change the Antrea's own package name?
That's a good question, and I could check, but I thought that when you use the workspace approach, I thought and you want to import, I'm gonna call them like submodules, right, in the workspace. I thought the path had to match. Uh, let I think let me think. Oh, I think you're right. Maybe as long as it can still find the module, it should be good. Let me double check and I'll update the issue if I need to.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Chan, for bringing up this point. Do we have any other question on this topic?
Yeah, I may just have to update the code here to find Is that the correct one? I don't remember. Oh, here. Yeah, maybe all that's needed is like updated entries here, so that it can find. I'll take a look and see what's needed. Yeah.
Okay. So basically, there's something that I missed. Are we thinking that maybe there will be no change needed for consumer of Antrea libraries, or do they still need to update their code to use the latest version of the Antrea modules?
No, we were talking more about internal changes to the Antrea code base and what are the import paths that are gonna need to change. When you think
Okay,
about consumers of the Antrea APIs, they're gonna have to change regardless. But right now it's broken, right? Because they have no way to import the V2
correct. Okay.
version. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, for a second I thought that we were thinking that even for consumers there might be no change needed, and I was curious how that could be possible. Okay, thanks for the clarification. And if we don't have any other topic, maybe it might be the right time to move to the 2.2 release update status with LAN. We have about 20 minutes left, so time should be pretty much right. Please go ahead, LAN.
Hi, hello. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I can give a quick update for the release 2.2. And so far, we still have a few, six opened PR and issues. The first one and this one is for, it's actually the same issue, it's for the same issue, and it's Windows related. And another PR is for, it's actually a bug fix. And I think we need more reviews for this. I already added this to our release log. I'm not sure if we need more effort for this, including review and just comments. If yes, maybe we can discuss if we can remove it from 2.2 or not. And a few remain PRs. These two actually for the new feature is packet capture feature. And still on the actively review, and I think based on current status, I would propose that we will release our 2.2 on this Friday, which is November 8th. And next, this one is, I think it's already approved, so I think it's good to go in this release. And the release log is already ready, and I have got a lot of review comments, and they're all being addressed. I will give you a quick update for the added features, and if you are interested in other parts, I will leave it to you to explore it. And in this release, we have a new feature, which is packet capture. And this one will allow the users to capture those live traffic. And also we have a few new Indicator subcommand for the BGP policy, which is introduced in last release. And we also have some improvements for the null policy related. One is to add accept field to the true native policy field in the IP block, and it will provide more control about the IP blocks. And another one is to enable the login for the Antrea node null policy. And then another one, I think it's for the flow aggregator, and it's adding a new configuration. And the next is about a feature parity, which will support the service traffic distribution in our Antrea proxy now. And next one is for the IP table, HasNet, and Masquerade rules, which we will support the random fully for that. Beside that, we also add a new asset to our release asset, and also a document update. Yeah, I think the major new features and new changes on the edit section, and remains are the changed and fixed bug fix. And actually, there are lots of bug fix also in this release. And yeah, please take a look at the release log if you want to double check the current changes in 2.2. And thanks all for the effort. And yeah, thank you. And yeah, that's all for the release 2.2 update.
Thank you, Lan. Thanks. And looks like another great release is about to come out. No question for me. If anybody has any curiosity regarding feature or bug fix coming into this release, please ask now, or as suggested by Lan, you can go and check the changelog on GitHub. All right. It doesn't seem that we have any question or comment on this. So before we finish today's call, is there any other topic that you would like to bring up? Waiting 5 seconds. Okay, that might be all for today. So thanks everyone for attending, and thanks a lot Antonin and Lan for presenting today, and we'll meet again in 2 weeks' time. I wish everybody a good evening or a good afternoon, and talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers,
Bye.
bye-bye. Bye.